Welcome back to another episode of the Productive Liberty Podcast. Today, I'm chatting with Nicole Sauce, or as my mother-in-law would say, the Coffee Nicole. We're talking about getting your personal finance ducks in a row. Nicole is someone who helps people design the life they want to live through podcasting, marketing coaching, and creating connections. She's a hostess of Living Free in Tennessee, which is a podcast on lifestyle design and homesteading. She roasts and ships coffee, and she's a motivational speaker. So, with that, I want to welcome Nicole Sauce to the Constructive Liberty Podcast.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
So they're not answering. And Nicole, for most of my audience would probably know who Nicole is because I have talked about you and I've been on your podcast and shared that with my audience in the past. But for those who have not heard of you before, why don't you give a rundown of who is Nicole and how did you come to be the hostess of Living Free in Tennessee?
I was born at a very young age in
At
Oregon.
a young age. Yeah.
A very young age.
Unusual.
Very. It was zero for just 1 second.
Wow.
And then I was raised in a family environment full of people who liked to own their own small business, which at the time seemed normal to me. But then in hindsight, when I see other families that don't do that, it was less normal. So I've always been inclined to start a lemonade stand or do something creative. I sang in a rock band for a long time. I studied music, German, and education. And all of that has totally benefited me in my life as a motivational speaker, a podcaster, a homesteader, a website designer, and a coach. And
Wow.
I went through 14 years of working in liberty-based public policy, only to realize that if you use a broken system to fix a system, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work? So I have to ask.
Not work.
I have to ask for a minute. You said you studied German. Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Ja, klar.
Yeah. Okay. So
Sprichst du auch
I know
Deutsch?
a little Dutch, a little like Amish. I have Amish in my background, so you can probably understand me better than I can understand you.
Yeah. Do the Amish use the Z form like that?
No, I don't.
Or do
I'm
they
not
say
really
Sprichst
great
du
at
Deutsch?
Dutch. I can understand most of it, but I'm a little less fluent in actually speaking it. So yeah. I brought you on today to talk about what I mentioned earlier, getting your personal finance ducks in a row.
I giggle every time you say that.
You have ducks, right? So you know
I have
about
ducks.
how
They
easy
do.
ducks are to get in a row, right?
It is actually not hard to get ducks in a row.
Is that easier than your finances?
Yes.
Oh,
I started by training my ducks at a very young age to go into their coop on call, and they tend to line up and do that. That's how I get my ducks in a row.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But not the personal finance ones.
The personal finances has been years long for me.
So how did you get started in helping people own their finances?
I didn't know I had, but I have shared my own story about getting my own finances. And I have a tendency to be honest about the struggles I face on my podcast, and it's been hard. And there was a very hard day for me one year, probably 6 or 7 years ago now, I don't even know, where I was earning close to six figures, living on a fairly modest homestead. You've seen it. It's not like this is an expensive place. And somehow more money was going out than was coming in every month because I was traveling a lot and I was paying for things that I could do on my own, but I couldn't because I wasn't home. And in order to make myself happy, because I wasn't very happy always on the road, I was buying things. And I figured I'd always earn more and more and more and more the next year. And so I looked around one day and I had a mortgage debt. I had car payment. I had paid off my student loans. So there was that. And I had credit card debt, the worst kind of debt you can possibly have.
Bad. Credit card debt, bad.
Yeah, credit card debt, bad. And then I looked at that and I made myself calculate how much interest I was paying every month. And that number was about half my paycheck, just the interest. And I freaked out. I totally freaked out. I cried, all of it.
Went through the whole 5 stages of grief,
I
or
did. And then I thought, well, I've looked at this ugly thing. What am I going to do about it? And I reached out, because in that situation, you don't always have your own solution. I reached out to friends and got advice, and I learned a lot about steps I could take to start down the journey. And the first thing I did was stop the bleeding. And the
how
way
do
you
you
do that is you stop spending more than comes in.
is that how that works? Yeah, that
Yeah.
that can be a tough thing, is it's the lifestyle creep. Your paycheck gets to a certain area and your lifestyle creeps up right below that. And then it's like, hey, I need this thing here. And so put it on the credit card, and next thing you know, you're behind. How
Yeah.
did you go about stopping that lifestyle creep, or stopping the bleeding, as you put it, and flipping the script from spending more than you earn to, getting actually ahead
Ahead
with
of
your
that.
finances? Yeah.
Well, my first goal was just 0. So lofty goal to pay off all your debt, in that situation, lofty goal to earn more than you're spending, and not as simple as all the coaches say it is, although it is. It's simple. It's not complex, but it's
But it's not.
difficult to
Yes.
do.
Simple, not
And
easy.
so the first thing was I hate clerical work, and I started blocking time in my schedule to go through all finances item by item at least once a month, but at first I was doing it once a week. And
Mm.
that's when I discovered the first thing I could cut out were all of the surprise expenses. Those subscriptions you don't remember you signed up for that are $5 or $10 or $15 a month, and they
Yep.
they add up. And then I looked at how much my different bills were, phone bill, like all of those things. And did I really need this cell phone thing or not? Yes, I did. But did I need to be spending close to $200 a month? No, I did not. I spend now $35 a month for my cell service.
Yeah,
And
you can find really, really cheap cell phone services, and a lot of the things that, like the
yeah,
little subscription things that you find, if you need them, you can often find them much cheaper than, the traditional or the easy to find stuff.
yeah. So I did a whole month or 2 of just what are the surprise bills, and then I continued to have surprise bills for another year or 2 after that. But I got rid of the worst of them. I started doing the thing with the envelopes where I put money in the envelope, and the first month I did that, I ran out of money about 2 weeks through. And did I stick to it? No.
No.
I reevaluated how much money should go in the envelope, because part of my problem is I was not planning for what things really cost. And so
Mhm.
for me, it was really important not to think I could get by with $20 a month on groceries, but to be realistic. If it was 50, it was 50, and I figured that out,
Yeah, and
right?
often when you start off in that envelope system, it's a shot in the dark when you're getting started. Like,
Yeah.
you just make a guess, throw something in there, and then you run out at the end of the first week, and you're like, "Huh, I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to figure out reevaluate some things in here."
Yeah, and I had already had habits of developing a deep pantry and growing food here and canning that and all of those things. But I had eating habits of having processed foods and things from the store, which I completely cut out over the next 3 or 4 years. And that brought expenses down. Not eating out brought expenses down. Not traveling for work brought expenses down. Submitting my expense reports for work at that time. I used to just buy stuff on the road that I could be reimbursed for, and I hated paperwork so much I wouldn't do the report.
Mhm.
So I made myself calculate how much am I not getting paid.
And that hurt. I bet that was a sad day.
That was a sad day. There was one year where it was like $5,500. Like, that'll knock out some debt.
Yeah.
So all of those steps were to get myself in the habit, and I did listen to the book. What's that book on YouTube? 10%, 10%.
The one Jack talks about,
Yeah, it's a
I
really
just
good book.
started reading it, The Richest Man in
Richest
Babylon,
Man
that
in
one. There you go,
Babylon. Yeah,
yes.
so I've listened to that book on YouTube rather than read it, and I'm a reader. And I've listened to it repeatedly. Every time I start slipping a little bit on the savings side of life, I listen to that book again. So once I
Mhm.
had gotten my expenses under control, I started paying myself before paying others. And you know what?
Started getting your stuff under control.
It works.
Things get better, yeah.
Yeah,
Fatten
and
your purse like he talks about in the book.
yeah, and I put it in an account that was hard to get to.
Mm,
So for me, in order to do that, if it's in my usual bank account under savings where I can just go transfer.
yeah. You
No,
transfer
no.
quickly. You're like, "I need an
Yeah.
extra 50, $75 this month. I'll just, like,
Yeah, I'll just
transfer that
grab it from
over."
there and then pay it back. No, you can't do that with savings. So
Mhm.
I got disciplined about putting 10% away, and then I attacked the credit card debt. And part of how I attacked that is not recommended by the Covey method, I don't think, is I would get offers in the mail for 0% for 3 years or 2 years, and I would transfer balances.
Gotcha.
And that's a 3% fee, but it's not 21% interest. And then I would not reduce what I was paying on that credit card every month,
Mhm.
the former minimum. I would put that all towards it. And instead of paying interest, I was paying 0%.
Right. Yeah, and
And I call
that's a
that
huge
the
chunk.
credit card dance. That only
Yeah.
works if you take those credit cards and you put them in your drawer.
And quit spending on them, right?
Literally, yeah, not in my wallet, not possible.
Only break in case of near
Yeah.
death or something.
I didn't need the freezer ice cube method. I just put it in that drawer and pretended it didn't exist.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So how far had you fallen, or how far deep had you gone before you realized you needed to make that change?
I was about $40,000 of credit card debt.
That hurts. That's a real wake-up call when you sit down and actually look at how deep in the hole you are, and
Yeah.
sit down and think of how many hours, days, weeks, months, years you've got to work to dig yourself out.
Yep.
That can be discouraging.
Yeah. And I think having my podcast, I launched my podcast when I was already into this process, but having
Mhm.
my podcast and telling people in my Operation Independence section, this is how the debt payoff's going. I don't do that every week, but I'll say this is how it's going. Made a motivational difference for me because I was making a public statement. And then when it was time to do a thing, right? And I want to just pay for something with the credit card, it was harder. But I will say some of the glitches I hit along the way was that, you know how you're supposed to have that emergency fund?
Right?
It's supposed to be $1,000.
Not enough.
Not enough, especially if you're self-employed. Because you know how it is. February comes and you don't make any money in February unless you build Taj Mahal. But
Yep.
other than that, you don't make any money in February. And it's the same for, like, I have predictable cash flows, but it took me a couple of years of watching that to know. And then you're like, well, do I feed the dogs this month or not?
Which one of us goes hungry?
Yeah. And then there's an emergency vet bill of $2,500 and you're like, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, this year I didn't have to I used my emergency fund for my dog who got hurt. I didn't have to
Mhm.
dig into the credit card this year.
Yeah.
So for
That
me, that's a total success.
and it's hard to know, like, on the emergency fund thing, you've got to start somewhere. So $1,000 is a great place to start,
Yeah.
but don't stop there. Like,
Yeah. And I think
we
like that method is $1,000 and then everything else goes to pay off debt. And I get
right.
it, except for if you're breaking the habit and you look at your lifestyle and you have kids and you have animals and you have all of these other things that may demand an emergency, you need to
Mhm.
adjust that fund accordingly, I think.
Yeah. I've heard it said, I think this is from Dave Ramsey. He said, "Sell so much stuff that the kids think they're on the block next."
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was
So what
Ramsey. I
about
said Covey earlier. I was like, "That's wrong."
yeah, how
That was that other
what
thing I did.
yeah, the other thing. What about people who think they can't earn enough or don't earn enough to get their spending under control? Like, is there a quick fix for that, or where do you start in that situation? Because I've been there, and sometimes I still feel like I'm there. I'm trying to build a house. My vehicle breaks down. I got to go buy a new truck, and
Yeah.
all these things come up, and it's like I don't know. There's way too much month left at the end of the money. Where do you start when you're in
Way
that
too much month
situation?
left at the end. That sounds like a country song.
It
I didn't know
probably
you were a
is.
songwriter, Ken.
It should be, but it's not.
Yeah,
That's gonna be a shirt.
you should. So I don't think that's a thing.
It's
It is a thing, but it's not a
not a
thing.
thing?
That's not a thing.
Yeah,
So
tell me a little
I'm
about that.
there. I had a lot of month left at the end of the money when my dog got hurt. And then like 4 other stupid things went wrong, including getting COVID, which was also not inexpensive for me. And
Mhm.
I looked around and I was like, right? Bad words were said in my head. And then I talked to a friend and she's like, you know what I do? I donate plasma. And I thought, okay, so my perception of people who donate plasma is that they're junkies who need to earn money. And
Mhm.
that's the wrong perspective. I can go to a plasma clinic twice a week, which I won't do it twice a week, but once a week and come out, 250, 300 extra bucks a month and use that to refill my emergency fund as quickly as possible. And then I talked to another friend about it who's really good at money management and the earnings side, you know. And
Mhm.
I told him, I said, this is going to sound weird, but I'm going to start giving plasma. And I know that sounds like not cool, but he said, "Oh no, I have a friend who maxed out his Roth IRA every year by doing that." So he would
Wow.
just take it, put it straight to his Roth. I'm like, that's brilliant. I'm going to keep giving plasma until my Roth IRA is full, And so there
Yeah,
are
yeah.
little ways you can earn money that you may not think about, or there may be a stigma attached to them, but there's nothing wrong if it fits in your life. If investing that 45 minutes, like I can be writing my cookbook while doing the plasma. So not only am I doing that, but I'm
Mhm.
also earning twice there because eventually the cookbook update comes out and then I sell more cookbooks, right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
or I could
absolutely.
be listening to something educational. So you're looking for things like that, or giving yourself permission to drive for roadie and deliver stuff, or Uber Eats, or any of these other million things we can do, or invest in bringing your costs down by growing vegetables in your garden in a way that makes sense financially.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And on some of the like the plasma thing, if you have to drive to get there, these days you have to consider the investment you're putting in. So you might not have as
Yeah,
big a return, but at least it's, if you don't have anything else that you're able to do at that time, a
yeah,
little step forward is better than not going at all, not no steps forward. So what would
right.
you say are the first steps to financial freedom, to achieving that, to so many of us it seems like the dragon or the thing that's out there that we want, but we just can't quite get there.
Well, what is
What
your
are the first steps
definition of
someone should take?
financial freedom? That's the first thing. What does that mean for you? Does it mean you're a billionaire? They may not even be financially free. I think
I
that's a
guess it
big
depends
part.
what your liabilities are.
Yeah. Yeah. What does that look like for you? And then once you have that established, back out of it and say, okay, how am I going to get there? And then you can figure out if you have a spending problem, address that. If you have a debt problem, address that. If you have an earning problem, because you might, I'm addressing an earning problem right now. I've
Mhm.
been moving forward, but I realized I should be earning about twice what I'm earning now. And if I focus my time better, because it's really a time focused problem, right? I can do
Yep.
that. But financial freedom is a different thing for every person. For me, it's going to be easier to achieve because I live how I do than if I live like my dad. Neither answer is wrong, but it is easy. If you simplify things, it's a lot easier to achieve financial freedom. I had a guy on my show who in his 20s realized he could build himself a tiny home and live in his tiny home for less than rent in his area. And that was his first step for financial freedom. So you need to look at both sides of the equation. And then the other, like, sort of early thing is get real. Get
Mhm.
real. Have that look at how much debt support you're paying in the form of interest if you have debt. Have a look at where your money's really going. Have a look at how it's coming in, and get real with yourself. Be willing to look at the hard, ugly truths of your finances, because most of the problems I see in finances is that people are not willing to deal with it. It's just too scary. It's too big. You're not supposed to talk about money. Talk about money. Talk
Yep.
about money every dang day.
Yeah, it can be a scary thing because money is what the Wall Street people deal with, and we try to shy away from that. But it's something that we all have to handle,
Yeah.
and the first step is to learn how to handle it, which I've done good and bad at it. And, you there's kind of ebbs and flows in everything, and especially it seems like finances. It happens the instant you get a little bit saved up, and you've had this experience too this year. Something happens, and boom, to the penny, what you had there is
I'm like,
gone.
wow, glad I
So
sold that
to
car.
the yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I wanted to spend that money on. So to the people who have gotten out of debt, who've quit overspending, but still feel like they're struggling, and I'm there. I mean, I
Yeah.
still do have some debt that I'm working on eliminating. Again, because I've fallen back into that trap from time to time, using the credit card again. But once you get to that debt-free place, but still just can't quite get ahead, what do you say to
What
them?
what does that mean to you? Can't quite get ahead. Is it that
It
your
just feels
account's at
like
zero every month?
yeah,
Is it
pretty well. I
emotional?
mean, it's that kind of the lifestyle curve, I think. What's the
Okay.
first thing you have to do to quit the struggle and to not have to worry about the money every week or every month?
Okay, so full disclosure. I'm not sure I'm the right
Yep.
expert to answer this question, but I will tell you what I think. And
All right, go for it.
I think it's a mindset. When you can't quite get ahead, you're telling yourself a story and you're believing your story. And you haven't started asking yourself, how can I get ahead? And a lot of what I see people doing is focusing on the wrong things. They focus on sort of the get rich quick piece rather than the daily discipline of how can I invest my time for a good financial outcome. And
Mm,
then based on that, and that's why I do my 3 things, right? Based on that, you're making better decisions. And then it doesn't usually all happen at once, but everybody I know who's gotten out of debt and also backslid again and then gotten out of debt again because they just realized that it's like being an alcoholic, right? Sometimes you go back to the bottle, and the
mhm.
the thing you need to focus on is what's my quickest reset? How fast can I go back to what I need to be doing? If you give yourself permission for that and then focus on how am I bringing the money in that I want to bring in for stability or resources, whatever those resources are, it will work itself out over time. And you'll start
Mhm.
having more and more savings, right? And then when opportunities come along, you're able to take advantage with those finances of those opportunities. Because I think the frustration you feel is that, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Wow.
Bless you.
That, don't know where that came from. Is you're seeing opportunities you're not ready to tap into yet because you've flipped to out of debt, but you haven't built up the savings and the extra stability that you want, so that when the
Mhm.
opportunity comes along to buy that business, if that's a thing, or whatever it is, invest in cryptocurrency, invest in the stock market, you're not there yet. There's like a second phase. You're out of debt, then you're building up wealth in sort of the traditional linear way where you save a lot. And then when
Right.
you have enough savings, you can start making that money work for you. that's a whole different ball game, right? When I know every month I'm getting a check on something and I've put money and time and effort into it, like my rental properties, that's awesome because I can get super sick and that money's still coming in, right?
Yep. That
Those are the
residual
kind of
income.
revenue streams you want to look at after you've got enough of a chunk that you're ready to do that.
Right. Would you ever, a lot of real estate experts, get into the rentals, they definitely recommend borrowing the money. Is that a place somebody should start, or build up that reserve before you jump in there?
I have borrowed against every property I own for rentals. And that is part of the business model. So I've figured out this much down, this much invested in repair, this much mortgage, and all of that, this many expenses in a year. Rent has to be at least this much amount or above. For me, the goal is positive cash flow immediately, not appreciated value, positive cash flow, because that builds up the emergency fund for that account. And then when you have to put the new HVAC in January 2022 for $5,500, then
Sounds like
you're
you've
not
had
like really
experience with
sad.
that.
Well, because I had just done it, and that actually I
Mhm.
had to put $1,000 in on that one. So I'm still paying myself, but I have positive cash flow. So every month that's paying that $1,000 back that came out of my personal emergency fund.
Right.
Right. And so having that model is super helpful. That's how I've done real estate, and it's worked really well for me. I've always looked at properties where I can get 10 times rent is sort of my initial. So rent is 10 times of the mortgage.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Let's explain what that means. So if I'm paying, I'm sorry, I'm saying that wrong. So if I'm paying $100,000 for it, divide by 10, I want at least $1,000 a month
Oh,
out of the
gotcha. Okay.
property. Yeah. So
Yeah.
10%. It's 10 times rent is
Been
the
a long
value.
day, right?
It's been a long week. As I mentioned, 4 pigs, 1 weekend, never again.
At least that Taj Mahal held up to it.
I did. Yeah. I'm impressed with the strength of your beams. There was 1,000 pounds of pigs on that beam.
Well, glad they
We
held
had a
up.
post in between them, though.
I wonder how it would have done if you'd gone in between the posts on all of that. I'm sure it would have had a little bit of sag in it, but
Yeah, we were careful.
yeah, that's
There
good.
was some strategy to that, but I
That's
decided
good.
we don't want to put a cow there.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier you use the my three things method. Do you use that in managing your finances too?
Probably
Yeah,
not with intention, but that's a really good idea. I think I'll start
yeah,
doing that. Sort of. When I've been I was using the whole credit card snowball thing, and then the only thing I did differently is I didn't pay off the lowest balance. I used the highest interest rate first, and that was the higher balance card. And so in essence, so my three things, what you do is you have a big picture strategic plan, then you have 3 areas of focus for a year or 5 years, and then under those you have up to 3 goals per one to get you there. So it's just a step.
gotcha.
It's top, down a level, and then each day when I'm looking at my day, I have up to 3 do or die things that I will do that's moving things forward. And sometimes just going to work and earning your money is one. And that's all you really need to do well that day. And it helps you focus. And then when all those distractions come in, you can go, okay, but what are my 3 things today?
Yeah,
How
does
many
it
have I
line up
done?
with that? Yeah,
Right. So you can have 1 3 thing. So the way I've managed finances is I have one. There's always the one thing I'm focusing on financially. And up until this year, it was which debt am I paying off? When the year flipped, it was how am I making more money?
hmm
How am I making more money while maintaining the ability to have the occasional weekend off and see my friends sometimes? Right?
it's nice to see your friends from
It's
time to time.
really nice to see my friends. And in order to get, so a good friend of mine coached me through the development of this, where I laid out everything I did in 2021, how much time I invested or how many days of work I invested in doing it, from the LFTN workshop to Self-Reliance Festival to Rogue Food Conference to shipping and fulfilling coffee orders to doing websites for people, like all of those things. And project by project, he had me go through every one. And the thing is, if I want to earn, let's say $100,000 a year, there's a certain per day rate I need to get. And that number is $274-ish, 270 something. And I changed this formula from that. But so when looking at an event like Rogue Food Conference, the question is, if it spent me 5 days, if it took me 5 days, 5 times 274 is a certain amount of money. I don't know that off the top of my head because I'm just not that good with head math, but you're a carpenter. You can do it, right? Let's see.
I work with fractions only.
Fractions only. Let's see. 274 times 5. So that's 1370. Somebody's screaming 1370 in the
Yeah,
background.
right?
1370, Nicole!
It's easy. You should know that if you went to first grade.
So then I have to look at how much money came in for that event. And that includes at the event. If I got new customers for coffee that subscribed for a year, I'll give the whole year. Profit, though, not gross.
Mm-hmm.
So how much profit came in? And if the number is lower than 1370, then that was not good. And I have 2 things I can do from there. Never do it again, or adjust what I'm doing to bump up the profit from that.
Yeah. So you kind of answered the question that I was gonna ask from that is how much weight do you put into that equation doing things that don't seem to have an immediate return, like you mentioned, Rogue Food Conference, or for myself doing the podcast. This is more a labor of love for me than anything.
Yeah, so far.
So far, exactly. So how much weight do you put into all the time and energy? And what have I been doing this for almost a year and a half now? This is, I think, will be episode 78.
Yay.
So
what do you do for your 100th episode?
How's that?
What do you do for 100th episode?
I don't know yet.
Time to start thinking about that.
It is time to start thinking about that.
Yeah.
But how much weight do you put into that, the laying the groundwork for your big picture vision?
That's a great question. And your podcast markets your services. So how much are you selling through your podcast right now? Do you know? Are you sure?
I mean, yes. Because I haven't gotten any construction people off of the podcast, and nothing else has been sold. So 0.
Would you have listened to my podcast if you weren't going to set the foundation for your big picture goal and eventually start a podcast?
I've found your podcast, I think, just before I started mine the first time. I think I did about 30 something episodes and then quit and then started again. But yeah,
are those 2 things related though?
Starting mine and listening to yours, I'm not sure. I think you and Jack were probably where I just was like, hey, I can do this thing too. You gave me great ideas.
How much money have you made building things at my house?
Good point.
So how many indirect things like that come from your podcast?
Yeah.
You don't know yet, do you?
I don't know yet. Nope.
Start thinking about that. So that's one way to look at it. The other way is not every single thing you do has to be about $1,370 from Rogue Food Conference, right?
Right.
Not everything you have to do. And building your network does give you more contacts for things, right? It gives you more stability in a very different way. And if you're going to be strategic with your time, not 100% of my time is about earning $274 a day, right? Because that's not what I want my life to be. There are other things that are also important to me and to you too. And if this podcast is answering that for you, just know that's why you're doing it and make sure the time you put into it is commensurate with that. And the third thing you can do with your podcast is say, okay, well, how can I get $5 per listener or $1 per listener? Is there something else I could do? Is it because I haven't asked? Do I need to add a tip jar to my website? Like, there's lots of things, right? Because for me, I evaluate my podcast. I have direct support in the form of event registrations and memberships, right? I also sell a lot of coffee. I saw a lot
Mhm.
of my coffee is sold right on my podcast. And
I was sold through your podcast on your
yeah.
coffee.
Yeah, see, and it was like, "Oh, I do wanna support her, and I get something for it," so it's kind of a win-win, and it might
Mhm.
cost a little more than the stuff I was getting before, but, that extra buck goes to Nicole, I don't mind.
Might cost a little more, but it's 10 times better.
It's
I'll
10
just throw
times
that out
better,
there,
and you can never
at
go
least.
back once you taste it, that there's also that
There
problem
is
that I've
that
heard.
thing. It's like
Yeah.
crack.
And it's like, like, so sell an addictive product, that's perfect,
Now I'll be brainstorming for the next week what kind of addictive product I can
Yeah, well,
come up
how can
with.
I be a drug dealer?
Uh,
But so
yeah,
that's
oh boy.
so and that's where when I'm talking to people about getting their finances in order, I'm not as stark as cut out all extra expenses possible, because if you make yourself miserable, you're not going to stick to it. And if $120 Netflix a year is your thing, then do that thing. Just don't also do Amazon and also do, whatever other streaming services people use.
Don't
I do
starve yourself
Amazon
to
because I
death
want the
then.
shipping benefit and I get video, and I don't do Netflix. That's why I don't do Netflix,
Mhm.
because I'm allowed one. And Amazon's actually becoming like, maybe I could just watch YouTube because they're getting expensive.
Yeah. Their quality isn't quite up to par, I don't think. At
Yeah.
least they're on their Amazon originals. So we've got cut down on your expenses as much as possible, eliminate all extra spending,
Yeah.
and we've maxed out what we can earn at our current job. What would be the next step, to somebody who is in a day job, the 9 to 5, going 5 days a week? What would be the next step for them to get a little bit closer to that, to their definition of financial freedom?
Well, so having savings, we forgot that one. I want to go back. Cutting down on your expenses as
Yeah.
much as possible. I know somebody who once spent a week and a half on and off on the phone with Verizon and got his bill down $4 a month. That was a terrible waste of time. So,
Wow.
yes, get your
I don't
expenses down. No, don't do that. Like, that ROI on your time is important. And, sometimes if you can make more money doing something else, which I think $4 for 40 hours of work is a bad idea.
bad idea. What is that, like
Bad
4
idea.
cents or something an hour? Oof.
It's terrible. It's bad. And I know a lot of people, it's like penny wise, pound foolish.
Right.
Always keep that in mind, because it's very easy for us to go overboard on frugal, and being frugal is good as long as it empowers you. If somebody's at a normal job and they've got their expense balance in place and they're able to put 10% away on savings, 10% away for their emergency fund, so that's 20%. Now it's time to gamify the situation. How much more can you save? Okay,
Mm.
that's one thing. Two, look for, because I'm assuming if you have a job and you're in that financial position, what you do not have is a multiple six-figure job. Okay,
Very likely
I'm
not.
assuming you're at a different pay scale, and therefore you are not working 80 or 90 hours a week. If you are working 80 or 90 hours a week and earning $30,000, then you need to start looking for a different job.
You can probably do better than that at McDonald's right now.
Right. But that doesn't mean that people aren't in that situation, and it's
Right.
hard to sit up and realize, well, I really like this job. Is it more important for me to stay here, or would I like to earn more money at McDonald's? I guess I'll go to, McDonald's because I'm going to earn more money. Nothing wrong with that. Just realize that's why you're doing it.
Yeah.
But if you're in the kind of job where you have weekends and evenings off, or you do 4 days on and 3 days off, or whatever it is that is your particular iteration of that, how can you fill that time building revenue into your life while giving yourself time to be with your family? Because if you ignore your family, that stinks. There are two things you can do. One, you can, if like you and me, you have land, you can get value from your homestead. You can do projects that bring you value, whether that's no need to buy pork again as long as you live, because there's 700 pounds of pork in your freezer.
You'll be
Or
eating on that for a while.
I'm going to sell some of that. Because I don't think I can eat 700 pounds of pork in a year, even with 4 families here. Or look for those side hustle things. If you like to knit, start putting your stuff up on Etsy. I was out at Dory Mulder's place, the 40 Acres in a Cave, and they had all these old mattress springs, like the metal ones. And apparently an individual spring sells to crafters on Etsy's for $5 to $10. And so
A mattress
start looking
spring.
for start evaluating the world that way. For a day's work, pulling those individual little springs out and listing them on Etsy, even if you only sell 5 or 6, you just made $60. And if you had fun while you were doing that, there's nothing wrong with it, right? Or if you're a carpenter, you could start doing specialty builds of something. I don't know, raised beds, prefabricated raised beds. People right now want to grow the heck out of their food, and they don't know how. Raised beds are a great way to get started, especially in a suburban environment where it needs to look pretty. And I bet you could make some pretty awesome looking raised beds.
I'm pretty sure I could. If I had,
you might know somebody who starts plants, who you could put plants in those beds.
I probably do.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at a plant starting rack right over there. So.
Yeah. Have you started your plant? Because I still haven't.
A few things, not a whole lot. I think mostly flowers. So
yeah. Yeah, flowers are
my
great.
wife is more of a flower grower, and then just a little bit of food to snack on while she's out tending the flowers.
Yeah. Well, flowers are beautiful, and you can sell them at the farmer's market.
Yep.
See,
That's the plan.
It doesn't have to be food. Like, she can grow flowers and sell bouquets to people, and they'll buy them.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's her high end goal. So
yeah,
working towards that. Yeah,
I love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is now a bad time for someone to set out on their own? I mean, we've gone through the last 2 years of COVID and who knows what all. The sky
now we're
is
going to go to war
falling
with Russia and run out of food and nuclear bombs, right?
Yes. Yep. It's the sky's falling every day, worse and worse.
Nuclear. I said it wrong. Anyway.
Nuclear.
I pulled a George Bush, man. I just pulled a George Bush. That was bad.
Well, have you ever watched a TV show 24? It ran, I don't know, 20 years ago it started. No. The main character in there, Jack Bauer, he says nuclear. So
nuclear. I know how to say it, but that
we always say that to make fun of it.
Yeah.
Is now a bad time to start a business amidst nuclear fallout?
Now is the best time to start your business. Yesterday was a better time, but now is the best time to start your business. And here's why. If you can make it work in this environment, when we are prosperous, you're going to explode. 2020 was one of the best years for me growth-wise I've ever had. And it started out a little slow through about June. And then it was like, and ever since then, every time I look around and I'm like, why are things slowing down? I say, put your big girl pants on, Nicole, and figure out how to sell stuff. And you know what I figured out is if you tell people you have something for sale and it's something that they want, they'll buy it. And the majority of my sales problems have to do with people still don't know I sell coffee.
I've listened to 300 of your episodes. I didn't know you had coffee, Nicole.
Yeah, you didn't know. So you don't listen to the end, do you? Maybe I better put it at the beginning. You start... people
skip the first 3 minutes.
They don't know they're coming, and it's 6 months later, and they're 6 months behind on my podcast. They're like, I want to go to the Self-Reliance Festival, and I'm like, good, because there's another one in 2 months. I'll get these emails. Oh, I missed it. Yeah.
Been there, done that. So
it's hard for people because they feel like they're a broken record reprint. I mean, you're probably not old enough to know what a record is, but it's like they were these vinyl things where needles went around, and if you got a scratch in it, it would just play the same thing over and over again. And I'm joking a little bit.
I love hearing those stories about long ago.
Yeah, about long ago. You think you sound like a broken record saying, if you want to support my show, get your coffee at Hollow Roast. And people who hear my show have heard me say that 14,000 times, or about 549 times by tomorrow. But the reality is that time it finally sunk in. It didn't sink in before. It was just words I said, right? And that's been hard
that morning
for me
they ran out of coffee.
And they're like, oh, I guess I need some coffee. Exactly. And that's the part I think where, so start it now and make it happen. But if it's not going well, figure out if it's not going well because you're doing the wrong thing for this time, or if it's not going well because you are not doing something critical like selling what you do, right? If it's because it's not right for this time, ask yourself what is right for this time and do that. And I know that sounds really flip and simplified. It's harder in the moment to figure out what that is, but when it clicks, it clicks. And
Mhm.
making, like I've seen so many businesses go out of business after the whole COVID thing, but I've seen so many businesses start and thrive because they tapped into what people are looking for now.
Yeah. So if you can find that thing that people want and sell them that, that's the key.
I'm
So
pretty sure
should
you
somebody
could be
quit a
employed as a
job they have?
carpenter for the rest of your year without trying anything at all.
Yeah, pretty well. Pretty well.
Yeah.
Even in my small town, there's no carpenters. I mean, it's nobody can find any people to do the work for them, I should say.
No. And lumber
Should
is
should
super
somebody
expensive and they're still buying it.
ridiculous. Yeah, it goes up. I figured a job recently, and in between the time I figured the job, and unfortunately, I've now learned to put a caveat in there that the lumber prices will vary, and so will my price at the actual time of the job.
Yeah.
But the material prices, I'm going to say, went up by nearly half in between the time I gave the quote and actually purchased it. So that hurt. It's still
Yeah.
hurting. But
That hurts.
it's one of those, it's part of the learning process, I think.
Yeah.
But you said now is a good time to start a business. Should somebody go out and start something full time, or is it better to do part time, side gig? Just start small.
That depends on where you
What
are.
do you recommend there?
It depends, man. It's like the famous permaculture answer is it depends. If you are doing the kind of business where you just need to go for it, then go full time. Do it. If you have
Hmm.
savings so you can fail, go for it. If you're young and don't have to support kids right now yet, go for it. If you have people dependent on you, then you may want to look at how that transition plan is going to be, right? And
Yep.
it's going to be a different answer for everybody. I had to cowboy it. I had to side hustle it. And then the minute I made the change, I didn't have enough savings, but I had to do it anyway for health reasons when I made the jump last time. And I just made it work, but I didn't have kids to pay for, so I had low risk.
Yeah. So keep your risk low and just go for it.
Yeah.
Awesome. This has been, wow, super helpful for me. It can be so easy to get inside your own head. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you just need that other voice to tell you the things that you already know, but you forget to actually do them sometimes. So that's been awesome for me. I'm sure that the listeners will get a lot out of this too.
Awesome.
Anything that you would like to say before we end this conversation? Any last thoughts or piece of advice?
I think so. The answer to becoming financially independent and getting your ducks in a row is going to be a little different for everybody. But the first piece is to believe you can do it. And I know that sounds very spiritual and woo woo, but it is. It's a
Mhm.
mindset thing because the biggest computer is right here in your head. And it's going to be working on that problem when you set it to work on that problem. And the way you set it, the way you program yourself is to ask yourself the question, how can I do this? Don't shy away from looking at the ugly truth, and then be willing to do it one step at a time. Don't expect to change in a week. It's going to take time and discipline.
Awesome. Nicole, where can people find you?
Well, if you're interested in getting in touch with me or checking out my stuff, I have a podcast, Living Free in Tennessee, at livingfreeintennessee.com. People joke that it's the longest domain name in history, but I have found a longer one, so they're not wrong. They're not right. Or if you want to have great coffee and support me in that way and try some coffee that will make you never want to have bad coffee again, just go to Holler Roast, HOLLERROAST.com.
I highly recommend it.
Highly recommend. I think I just mailed yours like this week.
Yeah, I think we got it already. So
Yeah,
awesome. Yep.
good.
Okay, cool. Guys, definitely go check out Nicole's podcast and buy some coffee. It's the best coffee you'll ever taste. You won't be disappointed. and do good work.